Today I'm doing a deck list for Winota Join Our Forces. It is a competitive deck, not maxed out, lots of things missing. There's a few cards in here that I just suggest not playing, but I'm using what I have access to. So Winota is a Boros commander. Her cost is white-red, 2 generic. She's a human warrior, and her ability is whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, you look at the top 6 cards and you put a human. So if a non-human attacks, you look at the top 6, put a human on, tapped and attacking. It also gains indestructible till the end of the turn. And then you just take the rest of the cards and you put them on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is a very creature-based deck. There are a few combos in here. So yeah, to give you an idea, that's all of our creatures. Our second biggest pile, other than lands, is instants. We only have the 1 artifact and the 1 sorcery. And I believe there is 4 enchantments. I think we're running 51 creatures in this. So we have Rogra, our favorite 0-drop. Is just a good non-human attacker in the deck. Ornithopter, another 0-drop, because they don't have to deal damage either. They just have to attack. So once they've attacked, before your opponent even gets a chance to declare blockers, Winota will put attackers in off of her trigger. We have Phyrexian Walker, just another 0-drop. Zergo Bellringer, it's a 2/2, 1-drop red. You can also dash it in, so you pay 1 generic and a red, and you put it onto the field. It gains haste till the end of the turn. On your end phase, you return it to your hand. It's also a non-human, so good for triggering Winota. Esper Sentinel is a human. We could hit this off of a Winota trigger. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, their first non-creature spell, they will either pay X, where X is his power, or we will draw a card. Yoshimaru Ever Faithful. I want to replace this with either Mother of Runes or one of the other protection creatures. This one is whenever a legendary permanent enters the battlefield, it gets +1/+1. Signal Pest is a 0/1. It has Battle Cry though, so whenever it attacks, all creatures get +1/+0. It is also a non-human and will trigger Winota. Same with Yoshi. Ishimaru Hound of Konda is another non-human. It's just a 1-drop 2/2. It will trigger Winota when it attacks. Ginger Brute, it has haste. It's a 1-drop 1/1. When it attacks, Winota triggers. Hope of Gurnapur. So this one is, I could sacrifice it, and until the end of my next turn, target player who was dealt damage by this card cannot cast non-creature spells. Creature spells. Okay. So until your next turn, target player. So how this would work is if I swung this at them, and then on my end phase, I sacked it, and the player it dealt damage to, they wouldn't be able to cast non-creature spells until the start of my next turn. So that's pretty good. A full turn rotation of them being able to cast nothing but creature spells. That can hurt a lot of decks. We're going to go into our 2-drops now. We have Spirit of the Labyrinth. Each player can't draw more than 1 card each turn, so you get your draw for turn. Anything past that you cannot draw. We don't draw too many cards in the deck, so it tends to be pretty good. Eggies of the Gods. I have hexproof, so if someone had a card that said target player sacks a creature, they cannot target us as a player. Archivist of Ogma. So this one has Flash. It's a 2/2 flyer. Whenever an opponent searches their library, we gain a life and draw a card. It's Archivist of Ogma. Harsh Mentor. So whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land, if it is not a mana ability, they take 2 damage. So if someone tries to go infinite with Isochron Scepter or Kinnin triggers, this will eventually kill them. Just another thing they gotta remove before going infinite. Aethersworn Canvist. Each player can't cast more than 1 non-creature spell a turn. 1 non-artifact spell a turn. Our non-creature spell a turn is the enchantment here. This is also a human, and this is also a human, so we could hit both of them off of Winota. Phyrexian Revoker. When it enters the battlefield, we choose a non-land card name, activated abilities of sources with the chosen name cannot be activated. So, you get the idea with that one? We usually with this choose things that make our opponents play faster, because we are playing a deck that wants to play slower, and part of that is we want to make our opponents play slower too. Eldrazi Displacer, you pay 2 generic and a colorless. It must be a colorless, and you flicker target creature. We use that for Dockside or something else. There's lots of flicker targets. There's a few things that come in and they make tokens when they enter. Another 2-drop in here somewhere that I'm missing. I mentioned Dockside and I don't seem to have my Dockside here. Got a bunch of my 2-drops at the back. Immolation Shaman. It's kind of the same as the other Harsh Mentor. So whenever an opponent activates a ability of a land, creature, or an artifact, if it's not a mana ability, they will take 1 damage. It is not a human either, so we could use it to trigger Winota to flip into other cards. Ornithopter of Paradise, just mana dork that's also a creature. It's a flyer, so it won't die most of the time. And it's a 0/2, so people won't even block it. It keeps triggering Winota too. Thalia, so non-creature spells your opponent's cast cost 1 more to cast. She's a 2/1 first strike. And it's also a human. Selfless Spirit, we sacrifice it. Creatures we control gain indestructible till the end of the turn. We are playing a very, very creature-based deck, so board wipes are kind of our worst enemy here. Drowneth Magistrate, one of the better stacks pieces ever made in Magic, at least for Commander anyways. It is a human, we could hit it, so your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands, which means you can't cast your Commander from the command zone. Urza can activate his abilities. Narset can't go off. It stops a lot of things. Loyal Apprentice. So at the beginning of upkeep, this card also has haste. It's a human, so we can hit it off Winota. At the beginning of upkeep, or the beginning of our combat, sorry, we make a 1/1 colorless Thopter. It gains haste, and we sacrifice it at the end of the turn. Anafenza Kintree Spirit. So whenever a creature enters our battlefield, we put a 1/1 counter on a creature with the lowest power. We must pick the creature with the lowest power. Dockside Extortionist. Dockside. Remorseful Cleric. It's a 2/1 flyer. It's not a human, but we could use it to trigger Winota. So we sacrifice it, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. It's a big thing with this deck is you need to have a good balance of non-humans to trigger Winota and humans to hit off of Winota. So we're going to go into our 3-drops. I already did Eldrazi Displacer. Aven Mindcensor, great stacks piece. It will trigger Winota. It also has Flash. We could throw it in as a blocker if we really need to keep ourselves alive or something. It's just there's been a lot of games where games have ended and people have told me if you didn't have that Aven Mindcensor, I potentially could have won the game. Evion of... I'm going to butcher the name for that. I'm just going to put it up so the camera can see it. It's 3-drop, 2 generic, 1 white. It's a 1/4 enchantment creature. Each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. Village Bellringer. This is one of our Kikijiki combo pieces. I am going to keep this off to the side here. So it has Flash. We can flash it in. When it enters, we untap all creatures we control. So we could use that to put some blockers up or to combo with Kikijiki. It is also a human, so we can hit it off of Winota. Another combo piece is Combat Celebrant. It combos with Ryona or with Kikijiki, and it is also a human, so we can hit it off of Winota. Sanctum Prelate. So as it enters, we choose a spell, a mana cost. I usually choose mana cost 2, and then each player, including myself, cannot cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost 2. Simian Spirit Guide, discarded out of red mana. It's an attacker that triggers Winota. It's a little bit of ramp. The other Thalia, again, first strike, 3/2. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So that's Thalia Heretic Cathar. Legion Warboss. At the beginning of upkeep, you make a 1/1 Goblin token. the thing that I really like about this one is every upkeep you make a token, it must attack, but they do not leave on end phase. So you can end up putting quite a few goblin tokens on the board, which are just more things to trigger Winota. Archon of Emeria. One of the better stacks pieces in Magic. This thing, I've seen it come down on turn 1 a few times, and turn 1 it is devastating. Just about any time in the game, though, it is a good card. So it's a 2/3 flyer. It's a non-human, so it will trigger Winota. Each player can cast more than one spell each turn. Non-basic lands your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped, which is just really good, especially the non-basic lands enter the battlefield tapped, because that's only for your opponents. That does not affect you. And if you can get that down turn 1, especially going first, it just forces people to play a slower game than they want to. Magus of the Moon. Non-basic lands are mountains. It's a human. It's one of our better cards to hit off Winota. A lot of decks get shut down by Magus. Professional Facebreaker. So whenever a creature we control deals damage, say for example, if we had 3 creatures deal damage to someone, we'd only get 1 treasure, but whenever a creature we control deals damage to a player, we make a treasure. So if there were 3 hitting, it only counts for the 1. So you get 1 treasure from each player you hit, no matter how many creatures you hit them with. However, whenever you sacrifice a treasure token, you exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card this turn. You must pay for it, but with things like Flickering Dockside and stuff in here, it can make us a lot of treasure tokens, generating us a lot of cards off the top. And we can end up hitting one of our combos from there, hopefully. So Goblin Rabblemaster is basically the same thing as Legion Warboss. Beginning of combat, you make a 1/1 Goblin token. It stays around, it must attack. The only difference is he must attack when he is able to. He also gains +1/+0 for each Goblin you control. So that's pretty good. And I believe that's just when he attacks. So when he attacks, he gains the +1/+0. He doesn't have it permanently. It's just when he attacks. Imperial Recruiter. Imperial we could use to search out Dockside, Kikijiki. We can go for Village. We cannot grab Combat Celebrant. We need Recruiter of the Guard for that, which is a card I do not have in the deck, and I have decided to replace it for the time with a Goblin Matron, because again, we do have a couple good Goblin targets in this game, or in this deck. One of them, Kikijiki. We could even go for a Dockside if we have Flicker Outlets, or just see that Dockside is a good card at the time. Viren Wingmere. So non-creature spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to cast. We're playing almost all, or that's not opponents, sorry, that's everyone. Even our non-creature spells will cost 1 more to cast, but we're playing so little non-creature spells that things like these are some of our best friends in the deck. We have Brea's Apprentice. So when it enters, we make a 1/1 Thopter with flying. It does not die at the end of the turn. We get to keep it. It's another flicker target. Same with Pioneer. When it enters, we make a Thopter. We could flicker it, keep making Thopters. And I know I got this one here. So this one, when it enters, it's Paya and Kieran Nalar. I've heard the card be called Moms and Pops One-Stop Thopter Shop. I kind of like that. So when it comes in, we get 2 Thopters. Blade Historian gives all attacking creatures we control double strike. This is one of the best cards for just winning through combat damage in the deck. I guess you still win through combat damage with the combos, but if you're not getting there with the combo, that's one of the better cards to do it. Restoration Angel, I do not see a lot of people playing. I arguably shouldn't be playing it. It has flash though, so if someone, let's say, targets my Winota, I could flash it in, and then its ability says, when it enters, I exile target permanent, return it to the field. It must be a non-angel that I exile. So, say someone targeted Winota with some removal. We flash this in. We exile her. They lose their target. Their spell doesn't have a legal target. We keep Winota. It's a bit of protection. It is also a Kikijiki combo piece. Audric. So Audric is one of those cards that has extremely weird text. Not even just weird text. It's really hard to... I've seen a lot of people play Audric wrong. So Audric says, at the beginning of each combat, Creatures you control gain first strike until the end of the turn. If a creature you control has first strike, the same is true for Death Touch, Double Strike, Haste, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, Menace, Reach, Skulk, Trample, and Vigilance. And a lot of people think what this means is if you have a creature with first strike, it gains all of these things when it attacks. However, say you had a flyer on the field. So at the beginning of combat, Audric is going to make all creatures have Death Touch. Now that this has Death Touch and also has flying, it will give flying to all your other creatures. Just like if you had something with haste, now that it has first strike from Audric, it shares it. So any keywords you have, Audric will share them among all of your creatures. I hope that was easy enough to understand. It is a complicated card. It's worded very, I'm not going to say wrong, but I don't know how they would have worded it better personally. Gold Knight Commander. So it's a human. We can hit this one. It's one of our other win cons like Blade Historian for combat if it's not through combo. So whenever another creature that isn't him enters the battlefield, all creatures get +1/+1 until the end of the turn. And that is not permanent. That is till the end of the turn. We're going to go into our 5s now. So we have Kikijiki, which is another one of our combo pieces. It's a 2/2 goblin. Costs 3 red, 2 generic. Comes in with haste. We can tap it, create a token that's a copy of target creature we control. That is not a legendary. It gains haste until the end of the turn. So I'll explain how that works in a bit. I have Thalia's Lancers here. When it enters the battlefield, we search a legendary card to our hand. Our target is usually Kikijiki. This is also a human, so we can hit it off of Winota, searching out the Kikijiki. Zealous Conscripts is one of our combo pieces. When it enters, we gain control of target permanent. Untap it, it gains haste till the end of the turn. And then Ryona Fire Dancer, which is one of the newer creature cards. I don't actually know when this came out, but I know when it came out, it was a big thing because any of these cards right here will successfully combo with Kikijiki. However, Kiki is a goblin. This, and this are all humans. This is not a human. So these two you cannot hit off of Winota's triggers. However, these three you can. And when Ryona was printed, Ryona does not combo with these two. However, it does combo with Combat Celebrant. So being able to hit these two off of Winota triggers is very good. Also, Combat Celebrant, just an amazing card in the deck. Same with Ryona. We can use it to copy some things to trigger Winota more. We can copy Dockside. We can copy one of our search cards and search another thing to our hand. It is a very good card going into combat. So I'm going to keep these combo pieces on the side because I am going to show how combo works before I get into a playtest. And we will now be moving on to instants. So in this deck, I do not play much ramp, and a big part of that is just not owning the ramp cards I want to play. I've decided if I'm not going to be playing that ramp, I need to play more removal. Most people will not play instants and sorceries in this deck. The 0-drop rocks, I would love to put in here, Mana Crypt and Mana Vault, but in their place, we have decided to put a little more removal than we normally play. So we have Enlightened Tutor. Just search an artifact or enchantment at the top of our library. Path to Exile. So exile target creature. Its controller searches a basic land, puts it onto the battlefield tapped. Swords to Plowshare. Exile a creature, its controller gains life equal to its power. Ephemerate, which is a card I seriously think about taking out. We don't have much counterspells or protection in this deck through creatures. So if we pay 1, and there is protection you can use in this deck as creatures, I just don't own it. There are much better options than this with Mother of Runes and cards that have similar effects to Mother of Runes. But we could pay 1 white, it's an instant. We exile target creature we control. It has to be a creature you control. It cannot be one of your opponents. And you'll return it to the battlefield. So if someone targets Winota, we can target Winota ourselves, exile her, return her, they lose their target. It also has rebound, so at the beginning of our next upkeep, we may cast it again. So with something like Dockside, it is a good card. We play this to also flicker our many ETB effect creatures, making more Thopters or whatever it might be. Pyroblast. Don't play the deck without it. Red Elemental Blast. Don't play the deck without it. I don't think I've seen anyone play the deck without it. I haven't seen too many other people playing Winota yet, but you got two. I guess you could play a Mana Tithe, but like you got two. Some of the best cards in the game. Play them. Silence. Silence is optional. I play it because, again, we're trying to slow our opponents down, and I really like Silence. It's one of my favorite cards to just shut one of my opponents up for a turn. Two very questionable ones are Generous Gift and Chaos Warp. They are both 3-drop instants for removing permanents. Generous Gift is just destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 elephant creature token. And then Chaos Warp is a little bit more tricky than that. So you cast it, you target a permanent, your opponent will shuffle it into their library, and then they'll reveal the top card. If it's a permanent, they put it on the battlefield. Land, creature, whatever it is. If it's an instant, it just stays on top. So this I put in the deck because we're actually kind of using this like a polymorph. We do use it for removal, but if someone removes one of our things and we maybe decide to Chaos Warp it, it's probably 80 plus of the cards in this deck are permanents. Let me... 10 of the cards in this deck are non-permanents. So we have a 89 card chance of hitting a permanent. You know, no matter what we get, it's better than just losing something and getting nothing. Sometimes we'd rather keep the removal to play against our opponents and remove their stuff. But we have used this as a polymorph, and it has done very, very good things for me. The last one is Teferi's Protection. Again, a deck that plays a lot of creatures. We're scared shitless of board wipes, so Teferi's Protection. Our only sorcery is Vandal Blast. Kind of stops us from going off with Dockside, but I'd rather destroy my opponent's artifacts, especially in the group that I play in. Fast mana with rocks is always a thing. I play one rock. It's a Soul Ring. We'll go into artifacts. The only rock I play is Soul Ring. So just being able to put people down to maybe, you know, just one rock, it's nice. So yeah, that's our sorceries and our artifacts. Like I said, there's a lot of artifacts I want to add to the deck. I just don't have access to them right now. I don't have other things to throw in the slots. So, enchantments. We have Deafening Silence. Each player can't cast more than one non-creature spell each turn, which is one of the better cards in this deck. It's a 1-drop. We can get it down on turn 1. Land tax. You don't play too much ramp in Boros. In this deck especially, we don't play too much ramp. Most Boros decks will play a lot more ramp than I am. Not only is this good because we get to search 3 lands to our hand every upkeep, but every time we search 3 lands, that's 3 lands we don't have to worry about hitting off of Winota. So if we search, let's say, 9 lands by the time we have Winota triggering to reveal cards, that's 9 lands we are not going to hit with Winota. That's 9 more chances we have of hitting human creatures. Land tax is one of the better cards in the deck, in my opinion. We then have Rule of Law. Another, each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. This is just in general. You cannot cast more than 1 spell at all. And Blood Moon, which is non-basic lands or mountains. 2 of the better cards in the deck are, or I guess 3 of the better cards. I didn't really want to play too many enchantments, but we had to make space for these. I'm going to go into lands now. Lands isn't the most important thing. We do have a Hall of Heliod's Generosity. So we pay a white and a generic. We tap it. We could take an enchantment from our graveyard, put it on top of our deck. This can be devastating with things like Blood Moon and Rule of Law if we could just keep recycling them. Even Deafening Silence. Karkeep. So it taps, adds a colorless. It's a legendary land. And we could pay 1 generic and a red, tap it, and make a 0/1 Cobalt token, which is a non-human and will trigger Winota. Fabled Passage, it's the fetch for thinning the deck. Scalding Tarn and Arid Mesa, again thinning the deck. Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, just some cards for getting us more than 1 color. Same with Sacred Foundry, Battlefield Forge, and Spectator Seeding. We then have 3 legendary lands. I put these in because they all did some things. This red one is very good. So Kenzin Crucible of Defiance. I probably butchered the first word, but whatever. So it's 3 generic and a red. You discard it from your hand and you create 2/1/1 colorless spirit tokens. And it costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. Which we don't play too many legendaries, but worst comes to worst, we get flooded with lands, and one of our lands makes us things that trigger Winota, other than just sitting in our hand being a land. Iganjo, Seed of the Empire. So you pay 2 generic, 1 white. Discard this, and it will deal 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. This ability costs 1 generic less to activate for each legendary creature you control. And then we have Flagstone of Trocaire. It's another legendary land. It taps 4 white. I just realized I was holding these out of the camera the whole time, wasn't I? So if it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you may search your library for a Plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. It's just better than a Plains. It looks cool. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Plains, 1 snow Plains. So 8 Plains. You don't have to play the snow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 mountains, and 1 snow mountain. A lot of the stuff that I play in this deck, especially like getting it down on turn 1 or turn 2 or 3, before we're going into Winota triggers, are red things. So we like to keep a couple more red lands. Mana tends to never be a problem for colors anyways in this deck. So I'm going to go over combo for a second. So Riona's ability lets us, whenever a non-human attacks, we look at the top 6, put a human onto the field. So if we hit these 2, and if we hit these 2, we will not win that turn. We actually need to go through combat to win. But we can hit these 2, and then say we went into our next turn. So we're going to enter combat. Riona will trigger, and at the beginning of our combat, we're going to make a copy of target creature we control. We're going to make X tokens that are copies of target creature we control, where X is +1 the number of instants and sorceries you've cast. It's almost always 0 instants and sorceries, so +1 would be just the 1. We'd make a copy of Celebrant. We'd sing that copy, which would trigger. It would give us another combat. We'd also have other things swinging, triggering Winota. We'd go into our extra combat. This would die. Riona would trigger again. We'd make another combat Celebrant, swinging that and everything else. So on and so forth. We'd have infinite combats with that. And then there are the Kiki combos. Also, when you go into combat with Riona, you don't, like, if you don't have combo, she is still a very good card. You can copy your search cards or Dockside, whatever has an ETB effect. So Kikijiki, I feel like most people know how it works. I'm gonna explain it either way. So I'll do an explanation with each card quick. So if we were in main phase, we would tap this. We would make a copy of target non-legendary creature. We'd go into combat. We'd swing the copy. It would give us an extra combat. It's very much like Riona combat Celebrant. And then with Zealous, so we would cast Zealous. It enters the battlefield. We gain control of target creature an opponent controls. Sometimes we'll tap Kiki to copy one of our other things, so when it enters, we can gain control of target creature. And untap it, it gains haste. Then we tap it. We make a copy of Zealous, which enters, triggering. We untap this. Then we tap this. We make another one. So on and so forth. We make infinite Zealous conscripts with haste, which will win us the game, as long as we haven't went through combat yet. And then Kiki with Restoration is the same thing. You tap Kiki, it makes a copy of Restoration. The Restoration enters. We exile Kiki, return it to the battlefield, do it again, make infinite Restoration Angels. And then we have Kiki, we would cast Village Bellringer. It would untap all creatures we control. We'd then tap this, making a copy. It enters, and we untap all creatures we control. So on and so forth, making infinite Village Bellringers. So we have a good amount of combo pieces in here for Kiki. And Ryona only combos with the one combat celebrant, which is not my favorite. I really like when combos have a few pieces on each side. We're kind of on the one Kikijiki, 4 things that combo with them, but the things that combo with them are also good cards in the deck just in general. So it's one of those combos where even if you're not hitting it, the cards seem to do things without the combo pieces. So for playtest, I am going to assume it's best case scenario and no one is countering, no one is removing any of our stuff. And I am going to skip the mulligan rule. I want to get a good hand so I can actually give an example of what the deck looks like when it's performing at its best. I don't think I've made any mistakes yet. The first 2 videos I made massive mistakes. If anyone has watched my last 2 videos and hasn't went into the comment section, below the deck list there is a description of the mistakes I made. Some pretty simple ones in my Gitrog list. I ended up using Summoner's Pact to search a green creature, and I ended up searching a black creature, which wouldn't have changed much. It was Gitrog, so instead of searching the Putrid Imp, I would have just searched Noose Constrictor or Wild Mongrel, and it would have been the same result. I had the mana to pay for it. And then in Kinnan, I set the deck up, went through it a few times, was super happy about making my first deck list, and then after posting it, had someone ask me for the deck list in the comments. Didn't even post the deck list originally, and realized I had three cards too many in the deck. Not the best case. And those 2 videos there too, I will be redoing in the future. I've decided not to remove them because it is still content someone might get something out of, whether it be a deck they want to build, some knowledge on a deck they already play. I will redo them in the future. I'm more focused on doing more deck lists. I have lots of decks I can do lists for. So that's the main focus right now. We'll be moving on to fixing up other things, and I'll probably redo it when I upgrade the decks too. I'm going to look at our top 7 here. No red mana. We are not going to keep this. So one thing with this deck not playing that much ramp, you want to keep at least a 3-land hand. Majority of the cards in this deck are under 3 mana. I think probably less than 20 of the cards in here are over 3 mana. So once you have the 3, can't get Winota out, but it's still a playable deck. Jesus. 6, 7. We will keep this hand here. Not a perfect hand, but we do have our 3 lands. So, turn 1, we would draw. We don't have any turn 1 plays, so we're going to Arid Mesa for a Scalding Tarn and pass there, having the Scalding Tarn come in tapped. Scalding Tarn. And I believe we are kind of in a bad situation for turn 2 plays as well. So we're kind of hoping to see something to play on turn 2 here. Not playing anything till turn 3 is never ideal, especially with the amount of 1-drops we have in this deck. We don't want to get stuck in a situation where we don't have any turn 1 plays. So we would untap, upkeep, draw for turn. We did not draw something to play on turn 2. We do have strong turn 3 plays. We're going to get down the Hall of Heliod's Generosity and just pass the turn there, sadly. Turn 3, we would draw, play an Orchard, pay 3 for a Rabble Master, pay 0 for an Ornithopter, and I will then enter combat, which will make me a goblin. It must swing this turn, so we'll swing it at someone that's open. Worst comes to worst, we lose the goblin. We'll say best case scenario, and we're not losing the goblin. So we go into our next turn. Untap, upkeep, draw. Play a land for turn. We're going to cast Winota. Then we would enter combat. The Rabble Master will trigger. Then enter combat, or at the beginning of combat, we make another goblin token. So we are then going to swing our board. This will gain +2/+0 from the 2 other goblins. And so we try to swing them at someone without blockers. But before we even had damage go through, before they even got a chance to declare blockers, we are going to get 4 Winota triggers here because we have 2, 3, 4. The first one, we hit no human creatures, so they all go to the bottom. And then the second one, well, that's kind of funny. We hit Athalia's Lancers. We will use it to search the Kikijiki to our hand. And shuffle our deck. Sometimes shuffling isn't the best thing, especially if you go a few Winota triggers without hitting anything. It might be a good idea to not shuffle the deck because you know you're going to start hitting them eventually, especially if you just put like 20, 30 off the top and didn't hit anything. And then we will have 2 more triggers. 6. Thalia enter, so our opponent's non-basic lands and creatures will enter tapped. The creatures entering tapped is a big thing in this deck. We like keeping our opponent's blockers tapped. And then we will have our last trigger. And we hit our combat celebrant here, which even without Ryona, if not removed, is a very, very, very powerful card in this deck. So these 3 would be gaining indestructible, and we would pass the turn there. So going into turn 5, untap, upkeep, draw. And this is why you should play more ramp in the deck, like a lot more ramp than I am. The faster you can get Winota out and start triggering her, like what a Mana Crypt or a Soul Ring would have done here. I would have had this going probably turn 3 with the Goblin Rabble Master, 2 tokens, and the Thopter. It's just faster. You got 4 mana. Which kind of sucks, because if we had one more, we could just cast Kiki out of our hand here. Combo off with the Combat Celebrant. We do not have the mana to do that. I think I would I'd get down a stacks piece. So non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. We don't really have much stacks other than the Thalia. And at turn 5, we definitely want to have more stacks than we have out right now. We also have mana up for the Ephemerate, so if we need to protect, we can. Going into combat, we would make another Goblin. We would exert this, so we get our extra combat. And I would not bother swinging the humans right now, unless someone was open, but I usually end up keeping them up as blockers. So we would have 3, 4, 5 triggers. This is a human, so we'll not trigger Winota. 5, 6. We hit nothing. For our next 6. 6. And we would grab our Gold Knight command, which will have indestructible till the end of the turn. And we have 3 more triggers. Go for Magus of the Moon. When Magus enters, the Gold Knight command will trigger, and all creatures I control are going to get a +1/+1 counter on them. I'm going to try to do this as fast as I can. This is one of the, to say the least, one of the more annoying cards in the deck. It does win games though, so kind of put up with it. I guess the counters on these don't really, I'm just going to take these off. These don't really matter. So we have 2 more triggers now. So Magus would enter, and after entering would trigger this. He would see a counter himself. 5, 6. We'll have Aethersworn Canvas, so our opponents can only cast one non-artifact spell each turn, which will trigger the counters again. Everything else will get another counter. I'm just going to do my last trigger. Speed this up a little bit. So we would hit Thalia here. So Thalia will only have the one counter on her, but everything else will be gaining 2 more. So those I don't care about right now. So yeah, it's a pretty big board state there. We probably wouldn't win the game, but we do a lot of damage. And then Combat Celebrant would trigger. We would untap all creatures we control. See, and this is an example of why Combat, even when it's not used for the combo, is just an amazing card. And then we would swing our board in at our opponents. Again, we would be thinking about where we're putting damage a lot more this time too. We'd be swinging damage at players that we wanted to die, potentially trying to kill everyone. I guess and you know what? These do not gain haste, so they would not be able to swing again. That's a good thing to note too, is if you get the Combat Celebrant extra combat, when you untap your creatures, if they're creatures that came in off Winota's trigger, they will not be able to attack. They came in attacking, which is why they attack it when they come in. But they don't have haste, so they cannot be declared as attackers. So these would all be sitting up here. I guess our Thalia's Lancers would be able to attack. And same with our Thalia here, which would have equal counters with our other creatures. So we would have 3, 4, 5. Oh, we'd actually make another one of these from entering another combat. So 4, 5, 6. We would have 6 triggers. Kiran and Pioneer, which will make me 2 Thopters, which will trigger the Gold Knight command 3 times, and everything will gain another +3. I'm just gonna throw on the side here what they're gaining. This would most likely be game at this point, unless someone used a Fog Effect or had a Glacial Chasm or something like that. And that's more Thopters there. So we're gonna have Pioneer come in, which will trigger, and she will create us another Thopter, which will put 2 more counters on all of our creatures. That aren't these 2 anyways. These 2 will be getting different amounts. Wow. Brea, which will make us another Thopter. So we'll have another 6, 7 counters. And this is 7 plus what they already have, which is currently 3. We'll hit Harsh Mentor, which will put us up to 8 counters. At this point, we don't care what we hit. We just want humans. 6. Is Imperial of May? Search your library. We must. So we will search our library for a card. And that will also put us up to 9 more counters. At this point of the game, we would be searching Dockside out. If anything goes wrong, someone psych riffs in response to declared attackers or something, we want to be able to rebuild. And Dockside is probably our best choice of rebuilding. I shouldn't say probably. Dockside is definitely our best choice of rebuilding. And then we would have our last trigger here. Hitting no humans. That's why the shuffle kind of gets you sometimes. I was on a hot streak there. So, everything that is a 3 will gain another 9, making it a 12. And then these will be gaining... This will be gaining 9. This will be gaining 8, 7, 6, and 5. Or no. This and this weren't out for I don't know what these would be gaining. I'd have to actually put some brain power into that. So this guy came in first. This would definitely be gaining 9 triggers. That one would be gaining 7. No, 8 and then 7. And then these would be 2, and this would just have the 1 on it. So at that point, we would most likely kill everyone with our board state here. Everything is massive. For example, our Winota, which isn't swinging. We should not do that. So 7. This is a 16-16 right here.